would have prevented his son's disappearance if he had woken up on time. Local rangers admitted in private conversations that this was one of the strangest episodes of their careers. No one saw James leave the camp. No one heard any noise. And yet a few days later, his belongings were found neatly arranged in the bushes as if someone had placed them there. So this story, which took place in May 1987 in the Big Ticket Reserve, is still being passed around among tourists and lovers of mysterious disappearances. Some consider it a classic example of the genre. A man disappears and after a while his belongings turn up without giving any clue as to where he went. And, as if to mock us, the missing person never reappears. The forest remains silent, and we can only guess what happened that night after the strange light phenomenon that friends saw in the sky. The police closed the active phase of the investigation long ago, and the parents received no answers, only pain and confusion. Many years later, the case of James Coleman remains open, but without any new leads. And it may well remain one of those mysteries buried in the thick undergrowth and silence of Big Ticket at night.
And to find any evidence that this missile system is being implemented without appropriate trials. Keep a steady hand, Seeker.
In June 2004, Whitney Lake, located on the border of central Texas, was breathing hot days and moonlit nights. During this season, the shores usually come alive. Families come for picnics, fishermen sit on the piers, and fresh air enthusiasts go boating. This is where 25-year-olds Tommy and Lisa Green went for the weekend, to get away from the city noise and spend a couple of days in the open air. They had been married for only a year and were full of plans and dreams. According to conversations with acquaintances, the couple wanted to spend the night by the lake and rent a boat in the morning to take a trip on the calm water. Neither of them were professional fishermen, but Lisa loved to photograph the lake's expanses, and Tommy was just happy to get away from it all. The next morning, as the heat was just picking up, some tourists driving around the lake noticed a car, an old Toyota sedan, parked not too far from the water. Both doors were wide open and the keys were left in the ignition. This was puzzling in itself. It was unlikely that anyone would voluntarily leave a car in such a condition. When the witnesses approached to check, they suddenly saw a map of the area on the hood. It showed the outline of Whitney Lake and the surrounding roads, and in one place there was a clear cross, as if someone had marked a specific spot on the northern bay or a branch of the lake. Perhaps this indicated the point where Tommy and Lisa intended to go. The random tourists tried to call out to the car's owners but heard no response. There was complete silence. Only the breeze rustling the grass and the car doors creaking. It was clear that something was wrong. One couple called the rangers, who arrived around noon, and that was the start of the search for Tommy and Lisa Green. At that point, little was known about the disappearance. Neither friends nor relatives had reported them missing. But the fact that the keys were left in the car with the doors open was already alarming. The rangers and local police officers examined the car and found some personal belongings, a couple of bottles of water, Tommy's wallet with documents, and Lisa's purse, but no money, which she had obviously taken with her. The keys in the ignition suggested that the couple had no intention of leaving for long. Judging by the minimal luggage, they had only planned a short trip. But why didn't they lock the car? Some thought maybe they were going to come back quickly, not fearing theft, since people are constantly coming and going in a tourist area. To clarify the details, an initial search was organized in the evening. A group of volunteers and rangers walked along the lakeshore in both directions, questioning vacationers. No one remembered seeing Tommy and Lisa, at least not a couple matching that description. Although the night before, several fishermen had mentioned seeing two young people asking about renting a boat. But witnesses were not sure that they were talking about the Greens. What was known was that there was an old pier in that area where boats could occasionally be rented from a private owner. But if Tommy and Lisa did take a boat, why wasn't it listed in the records? Perhaps they had made a private, informal arrangement. The next day brought an even bigger surprise. A mile from where the car was parked, an empty boat was found in the morning, neatly moored to a small ledge on the shore. This seemed even more absurd. The boat looked completely empty, with no life jackets or fishing gear. Inside were just a couple of old blankets, no documents or personal belongings. It seemed as if the owner or owners had simply gone ashore and not returned. The boat was in good condition, with little wear and tear, but it had no number or registration marks, which is sometimes the case with owners of old boats living near the lake. The police decided that Tommy and Lisa might have borrowed it from someone, but even if it was their boat, where were they? Why did they leave it there and not return to their car? Tommy's parents, hearing from acquaintances that his car was abandoned at Whitney Lake, immediately arrived at the scene.
New customers get $5 to get.
Parents, hearing from acquaintances that his car was abandoned at Whitney Lake, immediately arrived at the scene. They knew that their son had planned to spend the weekend in the countryside with his wife Lisa, but they had no idea that the couple had chosen this particular spot. They had mentioned something about a different campsite. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the police announced the start of a search and rescue operation. Volunteers, local rangers, and county police were called in. The area was flown over in a rented helicopter, and the lake's shoreline was checked to see if there were any two figures. Local residents were questioned, but no one had seen when or how Tommy and Lisa had arrived, or who they had spoken to, if anyone. The weather was hot, but dry. The water in the lake was warm, and the depth varied from place to place. If they had drowned, why had no one heard any cries or noticed any noise? And the boat was moored, which meant that people could have gotten ashore. Dogs brought in by dog handlers picked up the scent from clothes found in the trunk of the car, but were unable to follow the trail along the shore. The scent was lost after a few dozen meters. The lack of clues in the vast area of the lake made the task difficult. A search by divers also began, but with no one able to indicate the exact location of the dive, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Day after day, the tension grew. The official number of people involved reached several dozen, and the result was zero. No bodies, no signs of violence. The car and an empty boat suggested that the couple had gone for a short boat trip and disappeared. The route was unclear. The theory that they left voluntarily is absurd since the car was still there, and their belongings had not been taken. The parents did not believe that their son could have staged his own disappearance. Was it a crime? Had they been kidnapped by someone unknown? But how in broad daylight at a popular lake frequented by fishermen and tourists? And why leave the car with the keys in the ignition and the boat tied to the shore? The search continued for a week, sometimes interrupted due to a lack of new information. The local population eventually realized that this was yet another case of people disappearing near Whitney Lake, where the water can swallow anyone. But if it had been a simple drowning, bodies or some belongings would have surfaced, t-shirts, shoes, etc. The lake is not very deep around its perimeter, and in some places if someone drowns, the body is found within the first few days. But here there was nothing. The police investigation has not yielded any new leads. Lisa's parents also arrived trying to remember something. It seems that the cross on the map, lying on the hood, was made by Tommy or Lisa. It points to a certain area of the lake, possibly according to rumors, where the fishing is good or the view is beautiful. But then, why was the boat moored a mile away from the car? It is believed that they may have gone into the water closer to the cross to look at something and then, for some unknown reason, did not return. But still, there are no bodies, no conflict, no eyewitness reports. In the end, the official search was suspended and they were both formally listed as missing. Among lovers of mysterious stories, this disappearance was widely discussed. A couple arrives, leaves their car unlocked, a map on the hood, the boat is empty, and the people vanish. Some doubt that the story is true, but the car and boat are real facts from police reports, so something definitely happened. Rumors spread. Some talked about a whirlpool or underwater vortex at the spot marked with a cross, which could have sucked people in silently, but this is usually unrealistic. Others suggested that someone had attacked the couple, taken them away, and simply abandoned the boat, but there was no noise or struggle, and no witnesses. In the end, the case of Tom and Lisa Green became one of those stories that people later say they just disappeared in a couple of minutes, leaving their car and boat behind as if nothing had happened. Mystery enthusiasts add that Whitney Lake can be deceptive, with underwater caves, currents, and sometimes strange occurrences rooted in the legends of indigenous tribes. Common sense suggests that the couple must have drowned or gone somewhere, but why were they never found, even years later? No bones or clothing have ever surfaced, and all of their equipment remain in the boat. Located on the western edge of Texas, Guadalupe Mountains National Park attracts travelers with its majestic landscapes, towering ridges, rocky cliffs, and plains that gradually give way to desert. It was to this place that a group of 4 friends set off on August 14, 1995. Among them, 31-year-old Karen Smith, a woman who had long been in love with mountain trails and was ready to spend any free day in search of new beauty. That Monday, their destination was the Pinnacles Trail, popular with experienced hikers. The trail itself is not difficult, but it still requires a certain level of physical fitness and caution due to the high-altitude climate and sometimes steep drops in elevation. The weather was clear from the morning, and by 10 o'clock the sun was already beating down. The group, led by a trekking enthusiast named Russell, moved along the trail at a moderate pace. They hoped to reach the viewpoint by noon, take a short break, and then return downhill before the evening coolness set in. Karen, as her friends recalled, always walked closer to the middle of the group, sometimes stopping to take pictures of particularly striking views or wipe the sweat from her brow. But that day, everything seemed perfectly normal. No one noticed any signs of illness or anything unusual about her. After climbing one of the longer sections, her friends stopped to catch their breath and drink some water. Karen said something like, "I need to rest in the shade for a minute, then I'll catch up with you," and walked behind a rock formation, where, according to her, it was slightly cooler. As Megan's friend later said, "We were literally a few meters away and we saw her sit down and put her backpack on her knees." The others decided to go a little further, a couple of turns along the trail, to choose a place to rest. Karen asked them not to wait for her. "I'll be right there, just a couple of minutes." Megan turned around after a while, expecting Karen to appear, but there was no one there. It was as if the girl had vanished into thin air in the time it took the group to walk 50 meters along the trail. Hearing no cries or noises, her friends returned to the place where Karen had been sitting, but there was no one there. They walked around whispering her name, calling out to her, but there was no answer. At first they assumed that Karen had simply followed them but stopped a little further up the trail or had gone off to take pictures without telling them. But after searching around for a couple of minutes, they didn't see any traces of her. Soon one of the guys, Lauren, shouted, "Look, it's her backpack!" It was lying just below the trail, as if thrown at the foot of a bush. Inside were water, a wallet, and some personal items. Why did she leave her backpack if she was just going to take a short break? Why didn't she even take any water? Her friends ran around nervously, thinking she was nearby. After about half an hour of fruitless searching, realizing that she wasn't responding, Megan ran down to where their cars were parked to find the rangers.
Okay.
By noon, the cries and whistles of the rescue team searching for Karen Smith could be heard all along the Pinnacles Trail.
Day
The
therapy.
next 2 days saw extensive search and rescue operations in the area around the trail. Although the terrain around the Pinnacles is dry, it is littered with boulders, cliffs, and crevices.
Yeah.
The sun was blazing, with temperatures rising to 35 degrees Celsius during the day and dropping at night. If Karen had suffered heat stroke, she needed urgent help.
I'm glad you
However,
reminded
the
me.
dog handlers who searched the trail and surrounding areas
Oh yeah, David got money for the holiday.
they picked up a scent at the spot where the backpack was found, but it led in an uncertain direction. The county police, volunteers, and several helicopters were called in to search the area from above. Unfortunately, there was nothing. No rustling, no traces of clothing or broken bushes that would indicate the route of the fall. Karen's parents, who arrived a day later, could not believe that their daughter, always cautious and not prone to risky ventures, could disappear in broad daylight in a matter of minutes. There were no signs that she had fallen or slipped. There were no cliffs nearby, and any cracks had been examined. In addition, other tourists had been walking along the trail that day and had not seen anyone sliding down. No signs of violence or struggle were found. The person disappeared so quickly and silently, it was as if they had stepped into another dimension. After a week of fruitless searches, the rangers suspended the active phase of the search. Karen's relatives refused to give up for a long time, hiring private investigators and distributing flyers. But for about a month, there was no news. By the middle of the summer of 1995, the commotion that had followed the tourist's disappearance had almost died down in Guadalupe Mountains Park, and only her friends and family continued to wonder, where is she? Officially, the case was called Missing Causes and Circumstances Unknown. Some people in the corridors of power called it one of the most inexplicable cases ever. In the presence of a group of friends, on a clearly visible trail, in clear weather, with no signs of a cliff or
When your severe asthma says you can't, Tezspire says you can. Tezspire is an add-on treatment for people 12 and over that treats your type of severe asthma to help you prevent attacks, breathe better, and relieve your asthma symptoms. Tezspire is not a rescue medication. Serious allergic reactions may occur. Get help for swelling of your face, mouth, tongue, trouble breathing. Rash or eye allergy can happen. Don't stop asthma treatments without talking to your doctor. Tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection or your asthma worsens. Avoid live vaccines. Sore throat, joint, back pain may occur. By helping control your asthma, Tezspire lets you be you. Ask your asthma specialist for Tezspire by name. Tezspire.
Alrighty, folks, the President of the United States orders a Venezuelan drug cartel ship blown out of the water. Plus,
with no signs of a cliff or violent activity, in just a couple of minutes, a girl disappears, and even large search teams cannot find her. What happened in the Texas forests and canyons? Why do people disappear without a trace in a matter of moments, leaving behind only mysterious objects and inexplicable circumstances? If you like these stories like them, subscribe to our channel and be sure to click the bell to be the first to know about new, mysterious incidents in Texas and elsewhere. Leave comments with your theories. Maybe you'll find the answers that investigators have been searching for so long. Until next time, take care and stay alert.
A recording of a conversation between Kurchatov and Alikhanov.
Texas is known not only for its endless expanses, unique nature, and hot sun. Sometimes the state becomes the scene of mysterious and inexplicable disappearances that leave many questions and very few answers. Today we continue to tell the stories of people who disappeared right before the eyes of their friends and relatives in well-known and popular places in Texas. October 2004, Big Bend National Park. May 1999, Davis Mountain. And June 1992, Garner Park. What do these cases have in common, other than the fact that people disappeared without a trace? In October 2004, a group of 5 students from the University of Austin decided to spend their vacation in Big Bend National Park, located in southwestern Texas. Known for its majestic canyons, wide desert expanses, and legendary mysterious lights that flicker above the horizon at night, Big Bend often attracts lovers of unusual stories and secluded getaways. The students had long dreamed of spending a few days there, setting up camp, exploring the little-used trails, and of course trying to see for themselves the famous lights that had been the subject of so many rumors. Arriving in 2 cars late in the evening, the guys chose a semi-abandoned parking lot at the foot of a low hill where only a few tourists stopped. The weather was cool, as it was already October and the sun was setting, painting the sky in warm shades. When they set up their tent and lit a modest campfire, one of them, 20-year-old Robert Hayes, said he dreamed of seeing one of those mysterious lights. The others just shrugged. Why would they suddenly appear today? But Robert was burning with enthusiasm. On the very first night, as everyone sat around the campfire chatting leisurely and preparing dinner, a glow suddenly appeared on the top of a nearby hill, like a translucent ball of light, flickering slightly. It instantly caught the attention of the whole group. No one expected the legend to appear so close to them. The light was not very bright, but clear enough to cause general surprise. For a second, everyone sat in silent confusion. Then Robert jumped up, grabbed a flashlight, and commanded, "Guys, I'm going to check what it is." His friends tried to dissuade him. "Wait. Let's go in the morning. It's dark now." But he was too excited. In the end, no one actively tried to stop him. Robert left quickly and disappeared from view behind the nighttime bushes. The other kids, Sarah, Miguel, Joan, and Pete, only saw him climbing upward, heading in the direction of the light. According to Sarah, the fire burned steadily, then flared up and dimmed, and suddenly Robert was at the top. We could see his silhouette illuminated by the moonlight. He stopped, as if looking somewhere to the side. And then the light went out. Perhaps it faded in a split second, and with it, Robert disappeared. His friends could no longer see his shadow or movement. Miguel called out, "Hey Robert, are you okay?" There was no response. Deciding that the guy had just gotten carried away or tripped, they waited a couple of minutes and called again. No one came out from behind the hill. Then they grabbed their flashlights and climbed to the top together. But after a few minutes, they realized he wasn't there. That night, the friends searched the surrounding area. The hill wasn't particularly steep. The top was visible, and there were only small bushes around it. Finding a person who had simply fallen would not have been difficult, but there was no sign of anyone there. They called out again and again, "Robert, answer!" But the only response was silence, interrupted by the night wind. There were no signs of a struggle, no items belonging to the guy on the ground. Everything was clean. Finally, when it became clear that the situation was serious, Miguel went to the car and drove to the nearest ranger station. There aren't many of these stations in Big Bend, but eventually, closer to midnight, 2 park employees arrived at the scene. They searched the area with flashlights, tried to call out to Robert, and asked the guys to describe what they had seen, but to no avail. In the morning, when dawn broke, an additional team of volunteers and rangers was organized in the park to begin a systematic search. For 2 days, people combed the area around the hill, went down to the bed of a dry stream, entered sparse groves, and searched rocky ledges. Big Bend is not as dense as a forest, but rocks and desert areas can hide ravines and crevices. However, there was no sign of Robert Hayes. No footprints, no clothes, no backpack, yet a small backpack that he had put on before climbing. The dogs brought in on the 3rd day ran around nervously, occasionally picking up a scent near the camp, but then losing it at the foot of the hill. What was surprising was that the area around the hill was quite open.
Was being a resident at Thomas Waxter's Children's Center a turning point in your life? Maryland juvenile facilities have been major hotbeds of sexual abuse for a very, very long time. These failed institutions were meant to offer protection and positive change, and for many, it was the source of trauma that no child should ever experience. But is it even worth going through the pain all over again? Dozens of women have already filed their sexual abuse lawsuits with a chance of a $400,000 payout for qualified cases. Under new Maryland legislation, women can now file their sexual abuse case anonymously, giving them full confidence, free from fear of public repercussions or blowback. This new opportunity offers a chance at healing that was once promised a long time ago. If you have been
What was surprising was that the area around the hill was quite open, hills with relatively sparse vegetation. And if a person had simply been wandering around there, they would probably have been easily spotted from the nearest hills. But it was all in vain. Robert's sister, who arrived a couple of days later from Austin, cried over the unimaginable. How was it possible that in a single minute, a man who had been visible at the top of the hill had disappeared without a trace, without a sound or a commotion? While the rescuers racked their brains, the days passed, and not the slightest clue appeared. Then a week later, local tourists walking 1.5 miles northwest of the camp stumbled upon Robert's diary on the top of a sheer cliff. It was a bound notebook that he often carried with him for notes and sketches. It was amazing that the place where it was found was considered virtually inaccessible without rock climbing skills. Special equipment was needed to climb up there, and there was no official trail leading to it. The diary lay neatly, as if it had been placed there on purpose on a flat ledge. The ledge itself was only a few feet wide. The rangers who arrived at the scene risked climbing up with ropes and confirmed that the diary did indeed belong to the missing man. There were no traces of Robert himself or any other belongings on the ledge. A thorough examination of the notebook revealed no recent entries. The pages appeared to end with notes about travel plans. There were no references to a strange light or anything similar. This discovery further baffled everyone involved in the search. How could the diary have ended up on a hard-to-reach cliff, several miles from the place of disappearance? And most importantly, how could Robert himself have gotten there? Even if he had, he would hardly have left his diary there and gone off somewhere else. Clearly, something completely inexplicable had happened. However, the police filed a dry report. The notebook has been confirmed as belonging to the missing person based on the notes. Its further whereabouts are unknown. No further leads emerged in the investigation. Rumors circulated that someone had deliberately planted the diary, or that Robert himself had left it there as a mark, but nothing in the diary indicated such intentions. The accident theory, although logical, was difficult to take seriously. Why would he climb such a rock, alone and without equipment? There was no evidence to support the crime theory either. No crimes had been reported in the park during that period, and there were no signs of a struggle at the campsite. His friends insisted that he disappeared at the exact moment the lights went out, either a coincidence or something inexplicable. Some mentioned the mystical lights of Big Ben, which, according to local legends, sometimes appear at night and lead people astray. But this happened on the very first evening when the group had not yet had time to settle in. Thus, years later, the disappearance of 20-year-old Robert Hayes in October 2004 and the subsequent strange discovery of his diary on an inaccessible cliff became one of the local mysteries. His family came to terms with the fact that their son was probably no longer alive, as no news had surfaced. The county police closed the active phase of the investigation, recording him as missing under unknown circumstances. Many questions remained unanswered. Where did the guy disappear to? Who was seen on the summit 1 second and then the next? How did the diary end up in a place that cannot be reached without climbing skills? And what was the mysterious light above the hill? In May 1999, 35-year-old nature photographer Edward Brooks set out for Davis Mountain, the highest point.
Get away from having to just get there. This is what travel can be. Retrain travel. Amtrak.
Eli Manning here with Citizens. Shakespeare fans have money questions. Citizens has money answers. The recommended amount for an emergency fund, that is the question.
I think 6 months.
$5,000. 3 to 6 months saved is advised. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
In May 1999, 35-year-old nature photographer Edward Brooks set out for Davis Mountain, the highest point in Texas, to take some unique pictures of the sunset. Known among landscape photographers for his persistence and talent for finding unusual angles, he loved to work alone. He said that solitude allowed him to focus on nature. Those who knew him were not surprised by his desire to go there alone. Although the Davis Mountains are not known for being extremely dangerous, they do require caution due to steep climbs and gusty winds. Edward himself planned to take a series of photographs of the sunset sky, spend the night in a camp at the foot of the mountain, and return to civilization the next day. Judging by the notes in his notebook, which were later found in his car, Edward planned to climb to the summit during the day, catch the golden hour of the evening sun, and descend before nightfall. The weather that day was clear, relatively warm, with no storm warnings. Everything looked safe. No one expected any trouble, as he had been to the Davis Mountains before and knew the trails. When he did not return to his car in the parking lot on Sunday, May 16th, volunteer friends who were also in the mountain area became concerned. Edward's belongings were in the trunk, a supply of food, warm clothes. He had taken only his main camera equipment and a light backpack. Climbing the trail to the summit, the volunteers did not find him along the way or at key